In the middle of the forest in Tokai, Cape Town, under Elephant's Ear, in the shadow of the Constantia Berg mountain, there sits a dilapidated manor. But the worldly inhabitants have left long ago, as it has fallen into disrepair. But it is said that there are still two souls that haunt that manor, that of a horseman and his horse. Today we are talking about the ghost of Tokai Manor and how a story has allegedly turned into a legend, with people even claiming to still have sightings to this day. So get hold of your favorite beverage and get hold of a salt shaker. You might need it because things are going to get spooky. So we got to talk about the origins of the Tokai Manor. Tokai is now currently a very affluent suburb in Cape Town, and the thing about the 1700s in Cape Town, this was a society that was under Dutch rule, mainly from the Dutch East Indian Company. There was enslaved people who were working on these grand houses, for example, Groot Constantia, as well as many others, in order to produce more wine, in order to work the farms. And these houses, I believe they come with a lot of bad energy because of all the terrible things that happened there, especially with regards to the enslaving of people. Now, the Tokai Manor House itself, it sits just below Elephant's Eye in the Tokai forest, and it was built in around the late 1700s, but we will get there firstly. So originally that section of land was granted to someone of the name of Johan Ronch in 1792, and then he sold it on to a person of the name of Andries Tubus, who then who commissioned the building of the Tokai Manor. And the Tokai Manor was grand in its day. Think something along the lines of Groot Constantia, because in those days there was what South African would call a master architect. His name was Louis Thibault, and he would come around and he would design many of the great houses that still stand today, such as Drosty in Graafrenet, Groot Constantia in Cape Town. And these houses are examples of Cape Dutch style, and Tokai Manor was similar. It is also known for having these very high balconies or stoops. I'll put a photo in. But what we do know is that this manor house had some sort of bad luck attached to it, because a lot of the owners would become bankrupt over the years, and there seems to be a lot of bad energy. So when the house was built, it was then passed on in the 1800s to a man of the name of Louis Michel Thibault. And he was a very wealthy man. He was a socialite. He liked to drink his alcohol and have parties. Think of those in the 1800s. People still partied the same way that we do today. And he was known for entertaining everyone in Cape Town society, or the echelons of society, and basically, entertaining them. And these parties would sometimes really get out of hand. Louis Xeen is that he was born in around 1776, and he had a lot of children in those days. We know there wasn't Netflix, and it was basically just chill in those days. No Netflix was involved. And he passed away in the late 1800s. But he had a son, and his son Frederick would become the center of this legend around Tokai Manor and the ghosts that still haunt it. Said this family was very affluent. They liked to throw parties, and it was during one such celebration, when they were celebrating the end of the year from 1818 to 1819, that Frederick Xeen, Petrus's son, would lose his life. Frederick was an expert horseman. He would import horses over from overseas, and he would ride these amazing stallions throughout the farm. And oftentimes people would just stop what they were doing and they would just admire his ability to ride, to control the horse. And he was considered an expert horseman. And he would say that he rode a horse better than the devil himself could. And on his final night, on New Year's Eve on 1818, he had a lot to drink. His veins were flush with wine, and he had this arrogance and this hubris in his heart. And he decided that he was going to show off, and he was going to perform a stunt that had never been done before. But before we get into that, we've got to talk about Tokai Manor. It had this grand staircase, like many of these manor houses do. Picture Bridgerton, for example, when those ladies, they come down the staircase. And Tokai Manor had a staircase that was very similar to this. And let me paint the picture for you. We have a candlelight ballroom. We have guests in gowns. They're wearing their finest gowns and their coats. And they are drinking and they are laughing as the clock ticks towards midnight. And as the sound of the string quartets fade and glasses clink and midnight nears, Frederick stood up and accepted a bet. We don't know if the bet was made with his father. There are some stories that his father and him had a bet, or if it was an English naval officer, but someone and him had a wager that he could not ride his horse up the grand staircase. And as it was approaching midnight, it was coming closer and closer. Frederick stood up and he accepted the bet, and he said, "Hold my beer, because I am going to do the impossible." And everyone, I guess they would rush towards the windows to peer out what he was doing, go into the stables where he would fetch his stallion, a black beast that was so beautiful that when the sun shone on it, it almost looked blue. And to gasps and laughter, he would mount the stallion and he would spur it into the house, and to the delight and the horror of some of the guests, he would spur it up the grand staircase. And through the doors he rode, circling the dining room, showing off his horse to the guests. And just as that was happening, the clock began to chime, 12 strokes for the new year. And as that was happening, outside in the distance, the slave bell was ringing, signaling that a new year, 1819, had emerged. As the slave bell was tolling, and the horse, according to witnesses, got a fright and panic ensued. And the horse was on the top of the staircase and it reared, terrified. It was probably an amalgamation of the guests as well as, the laughter and being in a strange environment. But in a heartbeat, it reared up, and both man and horse together, tangled up in stirrups and in saddle, went down the stairs. And when their guests reached them, there was no life left in both the horse and in Frederick. Both of their necks had been broken. Midnight had come, and 1819 had claimed its first victim. The devil had claimed his due. Now, Tokai would later go into ruin, and decades later it would become overgrown. The windows would be shattered. The grand Roman baths would be reduced to nothing, stripped away. But sometimes when the wind rustles through the trees, you can hear the faint echo of hooves. And after that night, Tokai Manor would fall silent, but not for long, because legend has it that every year on New Year, if the slave bell is rung at midnight, the villagers swear that they hear the sound of hooves in the forest. They also sometimes see a black horse that climbs invisible stairs with a rider on it in clothes from a bygone era. Some say that the ghost only appears when the slave bell rings. Others say that they have seen it in the forest riding past at such a speed, and it seems as though horse and rider are still living it out in death together, haunting Tokai Manor and the surrounding forests. Now, as today, the once pristine Tokai Manor is in ruins. Locals say that who have lived in Tokai for many years that it has been stripped of all its woodwork, its marble baths, as well as all its glory. and even in its ruin, the ghost of Tokai Manor still endures. It is not a monument of wealth anymore, but rather a mausoleum of pride. Now, if they say, if you stand on the steps of Tokai Manor as the year turns, as a new year is announced, you'll hear the ghostly thunder of hooves and a man's laughter as he rides in the wind. And you'll know that Frederick Xeen rides again. Now, if you have a ghost story that you would like to share, I've put my email below. Please send me an email. And this channel is about sharing strange experiences. I had a strange experience in a house that I believe was haunted when I was 13, and I'll be posting that for Halloween. But if you like what I do, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button.